Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Board With Each Other, the board gaming podcast that looks at gaming through the lens of playing as a couple or with a regular two-player buddy or with some poor sod you're stuck on a spaceship with and you just need to pass the time until the aliens eat you. I'm Al Simpson and I'm joined as ever by my lovely wife, player 2 and co-host, Hannah Kelly.
Hi guys.
And today we are going to be looking at the semi-cooperative behemoth that is Nemesis.
Behemoth is a good word.
Yeah, behemoth is a good word, I thought so. So Nemesis is played on basically a map of interconnected corridors that represent a ship, and you take control of one of 5, I want to say, 5 characters that basically wake up from hypersleep on that ship to find a corpse of their crewmate in the room. And how gameplay works is you have a deck of cards, you draw 5 cards at the start of your turn, and every ability that you do in the game, every sort of move that you make costs resources, and your resources are cards, so you discard cards to do things. And everything you do usually costs either 1 or 2 cards to accomplish. Some cards themselves are actions and some are free, but others you have to play a card and then pay for that card with other cards. Play goes back and forth between the players, in this case 2 players, until one or both of you passes. So that basically means you keep what cards you've got left in your hand and you draw back up to 5 the next turn. The object of the game is completely dependent on the objective cards that you draw at the start of the game. You start with 2. And you have to discard that down to 1, so you basically need to pick what you're doing when the first alien appears on the map.
Not an alien.
Sorry, intruder. They're nothing at all like the alien xenomorphs from Ridley Scott's Alien and Aliens. Not at all.
Nothing
completely
at all.
different. Now we've got that out of the way, I will probably just call them aliens. Please don't sue me, Ridley. In essence, you have to survive, and you can do that by one of 2 ways. You can enter into a hypersleep chamber, the hypersleep chamber from whence you came, but if you do that, you need to make damn sure that the ship is A, going to Earth, and B, has 2 out of its 3 engines working. If that doesn't happen, you die. The other way to survive is by entering an escape pod, which there's certain in-game triggers that allow the escape. They start the game locked. They will become unlocked during the game if certain conditions happen. And if you enter an escape pod, then it doesn't matter what the state of the ship is.
Just floating around in space, waiting for some sort of lonely space traveller to pick you up.
Exactly, which is exactly what happened to Ripley. At the
Not
start.
in the film Aliens, because it's nothing like Aliens.
Yeah, no, nothing like Aliens. The aliens themselves, the intruders, appear when you move between locations on the board. Nothing on the map is revealed to start with, so you don't know what you're getting into, basically. The rooms are split into sort of level 1 and level 2 rooms. All level 1 rooms appear in every game, so they're all definitely there. The level 2 rooms are slightly more interesting mechanical wise, but not all of them are played every game, so it's a bit random. When you move between the rooms, the corridors, you roll a dice to see how much noise you make. And that usually results in you putting noise markers in adjacent and sometimes all adjacent corridors. If you make noise and you roll the dice and it ends up in a corridor that the noise has already been made, you reach into the bag of fun, that is the intruder bag, and you will pull out different levels of intruder, ranging from
Blank?
A blank, to small larvae, which are not facehuggers at all. Then you get...
But they do kind of hug your face.
They do hug your face and they do impregnate you with aliens, but they're not facehuggers, guys. Not facehuggers. Then you have creepers, which are sort of in between a larva and a full-grown adult, which is the most common type. And then you have our friend the Queen.
Breeders.
Yeah, you also have another type called breeders, but they only happen through particular mechanics of the game. You don't start with them in the bag. Once your turn's over and you pass, in typical sort of co-op game fashion, you have an encounter card where bad stuff happens. Any aliens on the map will sort of move around and attack. If they attack, you have a separate deck of cards for their attacks, which denotes whether they hit or miss, and if they do hit, what happens then.
Always bad stuff.
It's always bad stuff. And essentially you run around searching for supplies, trying to get the ship in working order, and pray you survive. Where the game gets really interesting is in its semi-co-op state, where a lot of the objectives actively require the death of crewmates or you to do something that is not for the greater good necessarily. You cannot attack people directly, but there are loads of ways in the game that you can indirectly send people to their doom if you know what you're doing.
Or if you're like me, just let me waltz around the board and walk into my own doom myself.
Yeah, sometimes I just let you do it to yourself, really. You know, it is a game that it is very much a horror game, and it is a game where you should go into it not expecting to survive. The fun of this game is not so much in the beating of it or the winning, it is in the emergent storytelling that comes out along the way. And I mean, I'll get into this much more in the scoring, but it is one of the best examples of that type. There's a lot more to the rules, but as it is it's definitely on the heavy side. I won't go into too much rule detail. Perhaps a few things will come out during the actual review, but I think in the interest of not making this beginning section and rules section 2 weighty, I think we'll sort of just leave it there and move on.
In terms of running time, I have to say that it's massively variable. We had a game the other night that literally took us 20 minutes before it all went horribly wrong.
I would say 20 minutes to 2 hours, depending on what happens.
Yeah, 20 minutes is probably an unusual state of affairs.
that is unusual.
It all went very wrong.
But yeah, I think if I had to average out the games that we played, excluding the extreme outlier, I'd probably say about an hour and a half to 2 hours tends to be the running time.
Yeah, agreed.
This is an interesting one. This is one I had my eye on for quite a while, I think, because I absolutely adore anything grim and sci-fi, so anything that's in the aliens and inverted commas universe, which it obviously is not, but anything along those lines appeals to me greatly. I love anything with a tinge of horror. I love cooperative. I especially love anything social in a game, so I really bought this one more to have on the shelf to play with people when they did come round, or a few of our friends that aren't into board games, more so than with each other, because I was aware before I got into this that it's probably not the best experience of 2 players, but I still wanted it very, very much. And also, miniatures. If you listened to the podcast before, you'll know I'm a miniature painter, and I get very excited. The miniatures in this are top drawer. So yeah, we found it and we took the plunge.
Yeah, I'd also point out that we got this as a discounted board game because there's a tiny little bit of damage to the box. I'm looking at the box now and I can't even work out what the damage was.
No, we've never actually been able to work out why it was damaged. But
and we got a hefty discount on it, which was lovely. So again,
because it is quite a pricey proposition if you get a proper new. And I guess it's probably one of the first big smash Kickstarters. I mean, as we said before, we don't do Kickstarters, but if they interest me and they come to retail, I will obviously jump in. And this is probably one of the first big smash hit Kickstarters aside from Gloomhaven. I think we took the plunge on.
So I'm quite a big horror aficionado in all its forms. So I think I was, when you explained the game and you kind of talked to me about it, I was definitely very keen on it. I think what I really loved about it in terms of its concept was the idea that you can be both cooperative but also have a competitive element. Now I've not really seen that in games before.
Dead of Winter.
Yeah, actually, well, no, I don't necessarily agree with that, because Dead of Winter you've got a betrayer mechanism, but actually at some point you are actively trying to make things harder for the whole camp, and you do go outside. This is very different. Yeah,
it's put people out for themselves kind of thing, as opposed to one versus many necessarily.
And I think it really feeds off that idea of paranoia, and if you had just woken up and saw a dead crewmate, that actually there would always be that level of suspicion. And I think what's really fantastic is when you read the rule book, the first couple of pages are actually just a narrative about the captain. It is the captain, isn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it's the captain, and it's just a really fantastic way to kind of introduce you to that concept of that dual competitive / co-op mechanism. And I just think it's a really beautiful example of that.
Yeah, definitely. We haven't played many games in this genre. I think mainly because for the majority of them, absolutely line in the sand require at least 3 people to play.
Yeah.
I think the difference with this one was this is actually playable with 2 players.
Yeah.
BSG
we'll get into that. Perhaps. Because I think BSG...
I would say BSG and Dead of Winter are quite similar in their term of you may or may not have a traitor in your midst kind of thing. And I guess this is the same. If everybody decides not to be a traitor, then fine. But I mean, we'll get onto this more later. Having played both sides of the coin, fully co-op where you're just playing objectives for the greater good, and semi-co-op, I don't know why at least somebody in the room is going to choose the bad one, because it's more fun.
I think it's also worth mentioning that the first 5 or 6 times we played this, we played like solely just
Full
cooperative, full co-op. We stripped out the
betrayer mechanics
from them, and then after that, because I think we wanted to learn the rules and understand the game, and after that we introduced it. I think it's a real Marmitey thing, though, isn't it? Yeah,
I think a lot of people... It's that weird halfway house between co-op and competitive. And I think there's a lot of people out there that play cooperative games because they don't like to be competitive. They don't enjoy it. But I think with semi-co-op, there's a real meanness that comes with it.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're competitive, you show your colour straight away. You're playing against each other. In semi-co-op, you could pretend to be on somebody's side and you stab them in the back halfway through. And I think we delight in that. I think we really enjoy that. Because we just like screwing with each other, basically. But I think there's a lot of people, particularly if you play as a couple, where that's going to end in tears. It's not going to be a nice experience. Somebody's going to feel very put out by it. And I don't think it works for everybody. Yeah. I think, as you say, it is a bit Marmitey.
And, you have that element. You can just strip it out. And I still think, like, the base game in itself... Well,
we'll get on to that. But there's rules for full co-op, like fully fledged rules for full co-op. It's not like a variant or anything like that. There's even cards, the objective cards that are labelled as co-op or solo. You can play the game solo as well if that's your bag. But you can pick a lane in that sense, and we have played several games.
I think we'd always choose to play competitive.
Yeah, I'd never go back to co-op after playing competitive. I mean, I think we're leading that way now. Shall we get on to scoring?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think there's quite a lot to talk about, yeah.
Okay, so we have 2 different categories within our scoring. So first we have the general gameplay, and then we follow it up with talking about it specifically from a couple's perspective. So our first...
Can I just jump in here? I want to give it... I think for me in this one, I want to give a bit of disclaimer. Where this first section, I try as hard as I can to be... player agnostic, but I think this is so affected by the player count that you're playing with that my scores in this first part are going to be geared towards it as a 2-player game. We are a 2-player podcast, and I think that's the way I'm going to approach it. I will talk about playing it with more, because we have, but I just want to give that little disclaimer at the start that that's the way I'm approaching this.
Okay. You do that. I have scored it according to the rules of Hannah. Which,
nobody understands.
Law unto myself. I've scored it how I will.
So yeah, sorry for my interruption.
Right. So our first category then is components. Well, you've started talking about miniatures already, so please do go ahead and wax lyrical about the miniatures some more.
I mean, just as a general package... This feels expensive, yo.
But I mean, it is expensive.
It is expensive, but it feels it. It's not like you're paying a lot of money and not getting bang for your buck. It's an expensive price point, but I would say the price point's probably about right. The miniatures are exceptional.
You've not painted them?
I've not painted them yet, but that is a project for, the next 10 years. They are, especially the intruder / alien miniatures. They are, if you're into miniatures, some of them are absolutely jaw dropping.
And all the adults are quite unique. There are a couple that I think are duplicates, but
I think it's
very unique.
I think it's 8. I think it's 2 of each, if I remember correctly.
So
they are quite
the
unique.
Queen is
the Queen is just astounding. You put it on the table, it's just this thunk of this massive thing going down. It's so detailed. It looks incredible. It comes with a fantastic organiser, which I always really like. Everything fits back in the box really nicely, and there are a lot of components. So the fact that everything fits back in the box neatly is great. Cards are cards, There's some really cool little quirks and things with it. You have these cards that they're called infection cards, and they're basically, you receive them when you take damage from the intruders. and you get them in your deck, and they basically just clog up your deck. But you don't know if you are actually infected with alien embryo or not. The way you find that out under certain circumstances is you have like this ye old 3D glasses viewer that you push the card into, and then it will show up whether you're infected or not, which is just really funky and cool. Like, I love that kind of stuff. It's something so gimmicky, but also just awesome.
But I think that's, and we'll come back to this later, it just feeds that paranoia, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's paranoia about yourself, let alone the other person.
Yeah, because, I mean, what he hasn't explained to you is about endgame scoring, because just assuming that you both survive and you both end up in pods destined for, or spaceship destined for home, there are other scoring criteria afterwards. So whether you're infected or not, we're not going to go into it, but actually whether you end up finishing the game with contamination cards is really pertinent.
It's not really scoring, it's basically the last hurdle to get through to see if you survive or not, because you could do everything right, but you could still be in that escape pod with a little alien in your belly.
Yeah, and it just bursts out your
then
chest.
you're just going to get chest bursted at some point and you're dead anyway. But yeah, I mean, again, back to components, I think it's a phenomenal package. It looks great, it feels great, it's really well designed.
So yeah, I would echo all of that. What's also really lovely is, I don't even know what you call them, but you know the little card holder things that you have that's got your number, so your player order on. What are they called?
I guess they'd be card holders. They're a little bit like, if people are unfamiliar, if you've ever
Scrabble discs.
Yeah, if you've ever played Scrabble, the Scrabble deck is a bit like that, but it holds cards, so you can basically keep your objective cards in view but hidden from the other players.
Yeah.
It also has a player number on this, and player numbers are really important in this.
However, one of the things that really irritates me is it isn't quite large enough to fit your full deck of cards in your hand, and I quite like to put them all in there. And that's a little bit of a tiny bugbear. I'm pretty sure that's not what they're supposed to be used for, but that's what I like to use
You decided
for.
to use them for something, and then you're annoyed that it doesn't work.
Well, games developers, you need to road test things on me first. But I think that's a really lovely idea. What I will say is, in terms of actual game space that it takes up, we have a dining room table that can seat 8. It's still a squeeze.
Yeah.
Around
as
that
far
table.
as table hogs go.
Yeah, because we also need the box with all the miniatures and all the bits in to be easily accessible, so we often put those on chairs. So it's definitely...
Yeah, it takes up a lot of space. So, buyer beware if you make sure you have enough surface area to play this.
I can see a lot of people playing this on the floor.
Because the board is massive. It is very big. And there's a lot of other gubbins that go around with it. There's all your tokens, there's your player mats, the cards that sit around above and below your player mats. There's an intruder mat. It takes up a lot of room.
And then on the backside of that is that then setup does take a while. However, it doesn't take as long as strip down.
No, strip down takes longer.
Strip down is...
Yeah, strip down is a bit of a bugbear of mine.
Yeah. And I think it's because of the number of counters, so you have noise markers, you have damage counters, you have fire counters, you have malfunction markers.
There's a lot to pick up and sort.
There's doors that you have to put down. There are still things on the room that tell you what's in the room. So if you get a room of fire, that can happen. You can end up in a room of fire. I have died from being in a room of fire. That just happened. So you've got all these very small fiddly counters. So again, if you've got mobility issues in your hands or stuff like that, this is going to be a real headache and a real bore for you. However, am I complaining? Nah, no, not really.
I don't think it's any worse than Gloomhaven.
No,
if you packed away Gloomhaven, you kind of know what you're getting in for here. I put it on sort of on a level of Gloomhaven, Arkham Second Edition, that kind of very weighty, lots of stuff on the map at the end of the game, put away thing. So it's a bit groan-inducing sometimes, particularly if you've had a 20-minute game.
We spent more time that night setting up and stripping down than we did actually playing.
Which can happen.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this 9 because I think it's a fabulous package. The only reason I didn't give it a 10 is because setup and teardown is a little bit of a headache.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've not talked about, and I didn't really know where this fitted, but I wanted to talk about the rulebook.
Oh, yes. We've never really talked about rulebooks.
No, however, I feel like this game does deserve a special mention.
Yeah.
And if you want, I can talk about it under complexity.
No, let's talk about it now.
All right, let's talk about it now. The rulebook is shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I've read a lot of game rule books. This one doesn't seem to follow any sort of progression logical sense that I've ever seen. You got endgame stuff is somewhere in the first fifth of the rule book. You've got things that are completely buried within other things. So whenever you need, it's all very well when you're learning the game and you sort of read it through, but when you're trying to find something mid-game, it is a nightmare.
Well, we don't. We just have to go with Google.
Right, either Google or we printed off some people on Board Game Geek have done some really cool reference sheets, so to shout out to them. I wish I had their names, but I don't. But
maybe we'll link them in the description.
Shout out those guys because they've made our gaming a lot easier, but you need it for this. You need a reference sheet because that rule book is a labyrinthine mess.
Yeah. I mean, and I just think that in terms of components, rulebook is one of them.
Yeah, I haven't counted my scoring, but yeah, fair enough.
And, I mean, well, it's either that or I'm going to put it under complexity.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
I mean, you know. That said, I scored it a 7, but then I remembered the first player counter was a cat in space, and I decided to score it an 8.
Board game developers, if you're paying any attention, if you want better scores from Hannah, just put cats in your game somewhere. Cats or plants.
Both.
Yeah, or both, and get a 10.
And slightly wider Scrabble dividers.
Yeah, don't do that, please. I don't know where we store them. Okay, so 7 and a 9. I mean, there's a difference between the miniature obsession and not really there, I imagine, as well. So, yeah, take that into account. If you're really into minis, give it a 9. If you're not, give it a 7. Okay, so I think that's quite a neat lead-in into complexity, then. So, as always, this is not judged on how complex the game is, but how well the complexity serves the gameplay.
And so here's what I've learned. I read the rulebook, and then I threw it out the window. And then I watched several YouTube videos, and we got some quick reference guides from the internet. And actually, the gameplay is not as complicated as the rulebook would make out.
No, it's not. It's not.
And I think when you first read the rulebook, it feels impenetrable, impossible to understand, and really difficult. But actually, after a few turns, it all begins to make sense. One of the things that I will say about it is that each of the rooms that you encounter have different functions and different uses. So not only can you get resources from those rooms potentially, but you can also use those rooms.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you were in the showers, you could have a shower, providing it wasn't malfunctioning, you could have a shower and wash off any slime off of you.
Yep.
Slime's a
mechanic
in the game. You also need to use rooms in order to complete your mission objectives sometimes.
Sometimes, depending on what you got.
Yeah. I think what I do find quite difficult about it is that I can't always necessarily work out what rooms I need to find in order to achieve my mission objectives, or even just to achieve end game. And it took me quite a while to get my head around that. And even now, every time I enter a room, I have to look at the rules. There's actually a quick reference sheet for that, which is quite handy. And if you've got a betrayer mechanism, you need to be really subtle about it. You need to kind of work out what you're doing.
Yeah.
You can't sit there poring over the rooms trying to work out if this is what you need to do. And I find, for me, that makes it quite janky.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a me issue.
No, I don't think it is. I think while no single part of this game is more complex than you would find in most other medium to heavy board games, there are a lot of different mechanisms. There are a huge number of moving parts in this game.
Yeah.
And it's quite difficult to keep all of those different mechanisms and mechanics in your head at all times.
Particularly when you've got an alien breathing down your neck, trying to whip you with your tail, and possibly a face hugger, not a face hugger, trying to...
A face caresser.
Yes.
There are a lot of mechanics, and I don't think they managed to find a generalised sort of one-size-fits-all. I think... What do I mean by that? I think sometimes when I play very, very complex games, once you learn the core, everything kind of falls into place. But this is like a whole bunch of gears working at the same time, where, there's core mechanics, but there's mechanics on mechanics on mechanics. There's a mechanics for the aliens attacking. There's a mechanics for the aliens taking damage. There's a mechanic for making noise. There's a mechanic for your aliens' resistances. There's a mechanic for eggs. There's a mechanic for getting infected. And that's the listener is not even a quarter of it. So it's just sort of system piled on system piled on system piled on system. And don't get me wrong, I like that. Because I like a really meaty, complex experience. Like, this is not me moaning about it. Like, throw a million mechanics at me, that's fine. I'm an ex-Warhammer 40,000 player. I'm used to a 200-page rulebook. Like, I'm all right with that.
I'm not.
Okay. But I think you hit the nail on the head, where you've got that, and this is what this category is about. That number of mechanics can start to interfere with the flow of the game when you are trying to do something sneaky.
I feel like we've played a lot of games of this now.
Yeah.
And yet I still feel very much like we're referring to the rules, and we're referring to not player sheets, like crib sheets.
We do more than most other things we
most
play.
other things that we play. That flow has never developed. And I think, and we'll get onto this, when it's a game that you are so inhabiting what's actually happening on the board,
It'll pull you out of it.
It pulls you out of it a little bit.
Which is precisely my issue with it in this category. It's not a deal breaker level issue for me, but it is an issue nonetheless.
And I would say it's the heaviest game, in terms of heavy, that we have on our shelf by far.
I would disagree.
Oh, really?
No, I don't think it's the heaviest game we have, no. I think I think there are heavier games, rules-wise. I don't think this is the heaviest one we have now.
It feels like it. Again, this is maybe my Hannah's...
Gloomhaven is heavier than this.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, I do. I think Gloomhaven's got more to it than this.
I'm going to think on that for a minute.
Why do you think on that? I mean... Yeah, it is a heavy game, and you should know what you're getting into with that. But it's not incredibly thinky. It's a heavy game because of the number of rules. It's not a heavy game because it's intrinsically, you're having to plan 5 turns ahead in a very complex engine builder or something like that. It's as far as the actual gameplay goes, it's very much sort of dungeon crawlery and all that kind of thing.
I've never had AP. So I have never gone, what is it I need to do? Because I need to do 101 things at once.
Yeah.
And really, I can only move one square because that's all
You've just got to deal with what's in front of you, basically.
It's very reactive in that sense.
And the game screws up your plans so much that you can't make long-term plans. You can't have a strategy that you can stick to because it just doesn't work. You'll just end up getting killed. Which you might anyway. Best laid plans and all that. So, I mean, this... I don't want to be too negative on it for being complex, because I don't think that's my issue. I think... And I don't know if I'm sitting here, I'm not a board game designer. I don't know if there's a solution to get the vision that they were trying to achieve without doing that. I don't know. It just feels like if there's one or two things that are a bit more streamlined or worked in the same way as something else, maybe it would be a bit easier.
Damage actually would be a lot easier if they streamlined it. So... I mean, just briefly, you will shoot a weapon, you will do an amount of damage, which is either a 1 or a 2 usually, and then you have to flip a card in order to see whether that kills it or not. Actually, whilst I love that, because it means that you can kill the queen with 1 damage, because, you just got lucky.
She's just a weak queen.
But I wonder whether maybe that's just one element that's just an added level of complexity. But
Yeah,
I love that, and I love that, so I wouldn't take it out.
I think my biggest bugbear, mechanics-wise, if I had to lay all the mechanics out, is actually the damage system on the players.
Ugh.
I don't like it. It just it doesn't click for me for some reason. Like, I always get very confused as to how many of these wounds you can have. There's a whole mechanism where you get light wounds, which you have a slider for, and if you suffer 3 light wounds, it turns into a serious wound.
Your 3rd light wound turns into a serious wound.
Which has an ongoing negative impact, but then there's a mechanism where you can dress wounds and cure wounds, and it feels a bit overstuffed.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like they could have just simplified. If they're going to simplify something, it would have been player damage. Like, for goodness sake, just give us hit points or something. You've got enough going on that you don't need this additional extra push-pull mechanic with wounds that they have.
Which is really arbitrary as well. It's not like it's player dependent.
No.
It's not like any players...
Yeah, it's all very random.
Yeah.
Yeah. So saying that, I mean, I thought a long time about my score with this one. I'm going to give it a 7. Because I think it wouldn't be the game it is without its heaviness. But there are definite areas where it could have been improved. There are definite areas where, in order for it to achieve a 10, it would need some streamlining of process. It would need to be a little bit more, perhaps, visually immediate for the players, so they didn't have to really obviously consult a rule book when they're trying to do something, some sort of subterfuge. It just would have made it a little bit better.
So I scored it a 6, mainly because I feel like the rules, as they are, or the lack of accessibility, or the lack of flow, perhaps, flow around the rules, impedes my ability to play.
Yeah, fair enough.
And I've never felt impeded, apart from the whole enlisting thing inside, I've never felt impeded by any rule, whereas I do in this, so I scored it a 6.
Okay, alright, fine.
So then our next one is shelf life. So thinking about things like value for money, replayability, all that kind of stuff. So one of the things that I will say about this is we played an awful lot of games, 2-player, and every single one of our games has been very, very different.
Yeah.
Exceedingly different.
Yeah.
We've had where we've both survived to the end and we've come down to final scoring.
Yeah.
We've had both dying. We've had a whole mix in between. And what I think is really, really interesting is I don't think the replayability is about the character particularly. So each character has their own ability.
They're not different enough, I don't think.
No, they're not.
But that's actually an issue for me.
Well, no, what I mean, it's interesting. They're not all that different, and yet still all of our games have been so very different in terms of outcome, and that I think is really impressive.
Yeah, because I think it's a wide open space where they've opened it up. The designers opened the game up enough for almost endless possibilities to occur, which comes with its advantages and its disadvantages. Its advantages are that every game can feel quite different. Its disadvantages are rather manifest. A game can be over in 20 minutes, as we mentioned. But perhaps more problematic is one of you can die within 10 minutes of a 2-hour game.
Right, but they've got a solution for that.
Yeah, which we've never tried, but I've not heard great things about it.
Well, what is that solution?
That solution is that a dead player can take control of the intruders, and there's an entire rule set and mechanism for doing that. But from what I've heard, it just completely overbalances the game in the favour of the intruders and basically just kills everybody off.
Yeah, well, I mean, the game's overbalanced in terms of the intruders anyway. I mean,
yeah, so it kind of makes the rest of the game a bit arbitrary, and from what I've heard, I've not played it myself, but it just, apparently it just ends on a bit of a damp note if you do that. So there are pros and cons to that. I mean, does that affect its shelf life? I think out of all the games that we've reviewed, out of all the scores I've given games, shelf life for Nemesis was the hardest one I've ever reviewed, because I'm not sure where I sit on that. And I think the reason why I'm not sure where I sit on that is it takes up a very unique space in my want to play part of my brain. I think if I want co-op, I'll go co-op. If I want competitive, I'll go competitive. This is when I want a game to tell me a story. And how much I'm in the mood for that is completely dependent.
So I'm gonna come out and say something similar but slightly different. I was so hyped for Nemesis. I was so hyped for so many reasons, because of the competitive nature of it, while still being co-op, the fact that it was like horror and the idea of paranoia. I was so in, and I thought this was gonna knock our whatever it was, our current top game off the spot, and it didn't. And yet I think I will still want to play this in 6, 7, 8 years' time.
Yeah.
But it has to scratch that itch for me.
Yeah.
It's not a game that I've played. Like when we got June, oh my god, we were like, boom, 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 June all the time.
Tear us away from the table from playing.
Yeah, you couldn't. And even now, it's still always in our top rotation. And yet, with Nemesis, I think because it's a bit more of a commitment, in terms of setup, stripped down, but also committing to the fact that you could be playing for a couple of hours. It's going to be like an Arkham Horror for me, you know? I think I'll still be playing this in 7-8 years' time.
Yeah, I would agree with you. But when you try to explain shelf life to somebody, it becomes a bit nebulous, doesn't it? Because is this a game that you are going to want to sit down and play for an entire weekend and then want to play every day after that? No, I don't think so. Is this a game that you could theoretically get sick of? Yeah, I think you probably could, if it doesn't fire for you. Mm-hmm. So it's a really difficult one to score. It is a really difficult one to score.
And I know we shouldn't compare games, but I'm going to compare Marvel, which we rated really highly in terms of replayability.
Yeah.
And yet, we haven't replayed it all that much. Whereas, you know, I mean,
in recent times, we played over 50 games of Marvel Champions. I don't know if that's a fair comparison. I think we played 50 games of Nemesis, and then you could compare them.
But I think, again, it's a very different...
It is a very different thing. Yeah, it is a very different beast. I think that is its blessing and its curse when it comes to shelf life. And I agree with you. I don't think it's something that I'd ever not want on my shelf, because when if the need took me, or the craving took me to play Nemesis and I didn't have it, I'd be gutted. Yeah. But I don't think it's that game that I want to bring back. You know, we sit down and like, what are we going to play tonight? It rarely rears its head. But when it does, I'm all in. Yeah. So it's an odd one. It's really... I can't really explain why it sits in that odd space for me, but it does. Which makes it really hard to score when it comes to shelf life. Because of my constant prevaricating and backing and forthing and what have you, I have given it a 5. Just because I think middle of the range is fair, because I don't know if I really have an answer. I think you might be able to, from our review and what we've talked about so far, you should be able to judge really for yourself where it'll sit on that for you. If variety is the poison to you pulling the game back out again, you're in no danger there. But if you need a game to do certain things for you, this won't foot the bill all the time. So,
we talk... You put a disclaimer right at the start in terms of, well, you're rating the general stuff as a two-player. I kind of want to talk about more than two players in this category. I think one of the really difficult things is that because it's a very heavy game... with lots of complexity and lots of rules, and we've talked about this, it's really difficult to play with newbies.
Oh yeah, teaching it is...
We've had an amazing game with somebody, and that was great, and he picked it up and he got it.
But he's also like an ex-Warhammer player, like he's not scared of rules.
Exactly. There are so few other people you could play it with, unless you've got like a gaming circle of friends who are willing to put the time and the investment in to learn it.
Yeah.
And I think, again, we'll get on to the whole two-player, multiple-player thing, but I think that would push it up a little bit for me. However, like I said, I still think I will want to play this in 8 years' time, 10 years' time.
Yeah,
It's going to be another Arkham Horror for me.
Yeah,
although I did fall very deep into Arkham Horror, but things were different then. Things were different. So I scored it a 7.
Yeah, fair enough. Fine. Okay.
All right, should we do scores?
Well, no, we need to... You do this every time. You don't care if games are fun or not, apparently. You're interested about their components and complexity, but not about their fun.
I treat games like our marriage.
Ouch. So, on that note, is Nemesis any fun?
Oh my god. So much fun.
Yeah.
You know, absolutely every single time... amazing things happen. Like, there are so many memories that I have from playing this game.
I have more memories from Nemesis than any other game, pretty much, because it feels like every game sticks in the memory because it creates a story that is either so profound or outlandish or stupid or hilarious or terrifying that it just stays with you.
So there was a time that I tried to I had to kill my other player character
you tried to kill
the game. So I tried to kill him, and I happened to be in the room that allowed me to eject him out of an airlock, and I did it, and I was like, yes!
But then, I had a spacesuit.
Who the fuck has a spacesuit?
My guy. So I had a spacesuit and I waltzed around the outside of the ship, came in the other end, and calmly got into an escape pod while everything exploded around it. There was another time we were playing fully co-op that we were in the hibernation chamber, and all we needed to do was get into the hibernation chamber, but the aliens kept coming, and we did that thing from Aliens where we basically grabbed hold of a grenade and exploded the grenade, and it killed the aliens but not us, and we crawled into our hibernation chambers mortally wounded, but we both survived. And then there's my personal favourite, where you got slimed and you just desperately just decided that you were going to cross the entire map to go and have a shower. While you're in the shower, the Queen surprised you in the showers. At which point you fire extinguished her and she ran away.
I'm pretty sure that did happen in Aliens, didn't it?
No, that didn't happen. The Alien 3, Ripley in the showers, but no, not nearly as hilarious as that. But I mean, that's just 3 examples, but it feels like from every game there's a moment that just lives in the memory because it's so outlandish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is an absolute joy to play, and I think the way in which we talk about our characters now, so in character draft you get to randomly allocate your characters, and there are certain characters that we cannot pick because we're like, no, bad things happen when I'm that person, and it's just become this.
But that emergent storytelling starts living on through games, doesn't it? Like, you try and avoid the showers now because you just once burnt.
Well, no, it wasn't just me that got surprised by the Queen in the showers. Yeah. You then got surprised by the Queen in the showers, but you had no fire extinguishers, so you were fucked.
But yeah, I mean, there's nothing quite like it for that.
No,
as far as I've in our board gaming journey, we never found anything that great. I mean, you get emergent storytelling. It's one of the reasons we love Arkham Horror Second Edition so much. But it's not this level. This creates stories that are just fantastic to experience. Absolutely,
and I think for that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of other things, emergent storytelling aside, the gameplay is really fun. I wish the characters had a little bit more difference. I feel like their decks are quite similar, and I feel like a little bit more asymmetry wouldn't go amiss.
I feel like when there was an expansion that added different elements to it. So, for example, the scientist who's in a wheelchair, he can't get serious leg wounds as a result. So I think
that was more like an errata, wasn't it? I think errata the rules.
I think there was but anyway,
they're having expansions which we don't have. But yeah.
And I also think that if you had more players, actually you'd be able to use those.
Some of those
a lot more. So, like a lot of them. So, if the captain, for example, he can
give orders.
He can give orders and things. But because there's only 2 of you, you're quite far apart on the map, and we'll get into this. But I don't feel like necessarily you get to interact all that much. And there are other rules for like interacting, so like you don't necessarily make move noise if you go into other rooms. So I feel like maybe that's a 2-player issue. Yeah,
potentially. I still wish they were a little bit more different, to be honest.
But yes, I mean, agreed. I think fundamentally they all kind of play the same, just about the amount of ammo you've got.
And I think the amount of fun out of this, the amount of fun you'll get out of this also depends on what you like in a game. This is, as I've said, very much a horror game. You are not meant to survive. If you want to go in there and shoot some aliens, wrong game.
Yeah, no. It's how do you want to die, basically.
Yeah, if you go toe-to-toe with them 9 times out of 10. I mean, there's a soldier character who's got a lot of ammunition, and you're likely to survive one encounter with him, and but anybody else... unlikely.
Yeah, I mean, even if you run away,
I often try and stand toe to toe, and then end up having to run away and just have taken a load of damage.
Run away.
Yeah, but again, that can it depends on your appetite for that, really, like sort of survival horror kind of thing. I've given it an 8.
I gave it a 10.
Give it a 10. Wow. Okay.
Wow, I do have so much fun when we play, and I do remember most of our games.
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing, isn't it? We so rarely pick it up, and yet when we play it, we have so much fun when we play it.
Yeah.
I think there's other reasons why we don't pick it up. So, on its own, when I'm playing that and I'm living it, and I am living it, you do live the game.
Yeah.
It's
fair enough. I'm not going to argue a score. It's like a 10. Ding, ding, ding. Wow. Okay. Oh,
Well, it's Hannah's erratic scoring. I just
Oh,
accept it.
I mean, there you have it. It's a 10 for you, it's a 10 for you. So that gives us an overall rating of 7.5. As always, we round, so that is an 8.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'm cool with that. It's a great game. It's awesome. So, yeah, I can go with that. So, on to our 2-player ratings. This is going to be somewhat different,
Spicy.
I think. So our first category in our 2-player ratings is table talk, trash talk, getting to know you, however you want to define that. I mean, I'm going to cut to the chase. It's great in this. It as with any semi-cooperative traitor mechanic kind of game, there's going to be so much table talk going on. There's going to be constant accusations flying about what are you doing. I know from your end, it's like, are you just being Al and playing the game stupidly, or are you actively trying to mess with me?
Al, we need to get home and check the fucking engine.
I've got my own priorities, mate. Like, I do what I like.
You're in the engine room. Look at the engines. Oh, shit.
I think, ironically, one thing that happens in this game is there's this glorious period somewhere in the, I'd say towards the end of the first third, where you start to get really suspicious of the other person, and things go quiet. And you just like, yep. They do that? So this is weird dead zone, and then at some point things are going to get obvious, and then the table talk just shoots off from there. I mean, it's constant shouting at each other, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why?
But I think even then, even despite all of that, like, because you're exploring new, and you're always going into new rooms because, you know, you want to see what's there and what you can get out, and you need to get loot and all this kind of stuff, that you're always talking about what's actually happening in game.
Yeah.
And it's never a quiet moment.
No. And if you do play it as a fully cooperative experience, obviously the table chatter and talk and planning is constant. Like, you're constantly talking about what should we do, what should I do, what should you do. I mean, any way you play it, aside from that dead third, which I think is actually part of it, like that bit where you're not very sure, and people are checking rules and doing odd things is always interesting, and that tends to be quite quiet. But aside from that, it's very, very interactive.
Yeah. I don't think there's much more to say, really.
No.
Like, if that's what you're looking for in a game,
Yeah.
absolutely for Nemesis. And for me, I think I scored it an 8. Why didn't I score it a 10?
I scored it an 8 as well.
Yeah.
I think 8's a fair score for it. The reason I scored it an 8 is from a 2-player perspective. I think if you play with 3 or 4, it'll probably take it to a 10.
Yeah.
Aside from BSG, and something like Coup or Werewolf, I think in terms of, like, you know, that proper banter and accusations flying around with more people around the table, you can't really beat it for me.
Yeah. As a 2-player, I suppose you can't really, because although I've accused you out and outright of why are you fucking this up, what are you doing, there's nowhere else to go.
No, there isn't. So it does that's the limitation. But even still, as a 2-player game, that table talk is great, which is why I think 8 is a perfectly fair score. Okay, you want to take us to the next one?
Yeah, so the next one is our competitive / co-op rating. So again, it's how well does the game fit?
How competitive or cooperative is it? And this is a really odd one with
Because
the
it's both.
semi-co-op. Yeah.
But I think that's why I've scored it so highly, because it can be both. You get to choose. And not only do you get to choose by stripping out the competitive mission cards, when the first alien appears on the board, you then get to choose between your 2 mission cards, which for me generally has normally always been 1 and 1. So I can choose between the 2, and you get to choose usually which is the most likely, which is the most one that's likely to happen. But you have that element of choice, and I think that's what makes it, for me, that really perfect balance. Although arguably, now I'm saying that,
So I'm going to put my cards on the table. We're going off in completely different directions, yeah? So looking at this from a 2-player perspective, with somebody that you play games with a lot, I don't think it works especially well either competitively or cooperatively. I don't think that's what the game's about for me. I think as a co-op, it feels a bit arbitrary. It feels like you're both just going through the ship and doing things. And competitively, it's too tight with 2 players to really be competitive. I think a lot of the mechanisms that you can use to really screw over the other player, because of the wide openness of the board, don't work as well. I don't think it works that great for either as a 2-player.
That's really interesting.
But that's okay for me, because that's not really what the game's about for me. It's about that storytelling, and it's about that having fun. And I have a huge amount of fun with it, but I don't think it works particularly well competitively or cooperatively with 2 players. With more it does, and I know it does because we've been there.
Yeah, so I'm going to challenge you a little bit on that. So let's just stick to the idea of it being cooperative. So one of the things is that if you both survived to the end of the game, there are a whole bunch of additional things that happen on the end of it. So yeah, and you do get scoring at the end of it.
No, there's no scoring.
No, there is, because if you both get point. If you both survive, that's great. Then you have to check for like contamination and all that kind of stuff, and then you check your mission points.
Yeah, but there's no points. You either fail your mission or succeed. If you both succeed, it's a tie, and we've had those before playing cooperatively. There's no scoring.
Is there not?
No.
I completely misremembered that one.
Yeah, there's no scoring. You either win. You either win or you lose. And in a cooperative game, if you both win,
in which case then it's never really ever cooperative.
No, not well. The idea behind the cooperative game is that you both win. You win, the game loses. That's the crux of any.
See, this happens so rarely that I can't even remember what happens at endgame.
That's the crux of most competitive games. You win or the game wins.
Yeah.
When it comes to semi-co-op, you can have multiple winners, because you have multiple people survive and complete the objectives. But obviously, if you both survive and one of you completed your objective and the other didn't, the one that completed the objective wins, the other one loses, and we've had that as well. So yeah.
We are coming up from complete different angles, and I think that's really cool and that's fun.
Yeah,
I would change my score as a result.
No, I'm not changing mine either. I mean, I've scored this quite lowly. I scored a 3.
So I scored it an 8.
Okay, that's fine.
What I also wrote on my little notes was it creates this perfect paranoia that I think is...
Yeah.
Not perfect paranoia, it's not perfect paranoia, but it just creates this sense of paranoia, particularly when you're playing competitively, that I just think is really hard to beat.
Yeah, I agree with you, but again, that falls more into the fun and emergent storytelling section for me than it does the competitive cooperability side. Me. So yeah, no, I stick by it. I don't think it works that well as a 2-player in either of those things. If you're looking for something that is incredibly cooperative and you're working together for a common goal, or you're looking for something that's fiercely competitive, I don't think it, as a 2-player, I don't think it fits either bill.
You see these things, I think I should adjust my score, but I'm not going to. My score is my score. It's Hannah's random scoring. Yeah. It's fine. What I say is more important than the number I get.
Okay, so on to our final category, which is scalability and FOMO. And I think if you've been listening at all, you know where this is going.
We've played, one game with another person, and that was lit.
Yeah, it was one of the best ball games I've played with an extra person. I imagine with 4 and 5, it's just even better. I mean, this with 5 people,
Although I suspect that your game length will go on considerably more than 2 hours.
Yeah, you probably need to put aside 3 hours at least, I think, to play this if you're playing with like 5 people.
Yeah.
But I imagine as an afternoon experience with sort of 5 people who all knew the rules, it would be pretty much untouchable.
And that's the thing, isn't it? That's why it doesn't come out more often.
Yeah.
Because actually, it would be so much more. It would be so much better.
But it's also why I'm never getting rid of it. Because we do have friends who do play board games, and we don't get to see them as much as we would like to. But when they come round, I'm rushing for this. I'm running straight to the shelf for this. But that fits into the scoring category where You know, the scalability doesn't work as a two-player game. Yeah, it does.
It does, and it's fun, and it's great, and we have a really good time.
But it's the FOMO thing that gets me with this. Like, are we missing out with not playing with more people? Absolutely 100% we are.
And here's the thing. So we've talked about all the mechanics and being overly clunky. Well, realistically, aside from you need to pay attention to your rooms and all this sort of stuff, a lot of the mechanic-y stuff we can deal with.
Yeah, you can when you're playing with a newbie, and I think if you play with a newbie who's
experienced at gaming,
and also is okay with just being a bit of a wild card. I mean, we played with our friend, and he just decided to, for no real reason.
No, it's his objective.
Well, yeah, but I mean, his behaviour was erratic, and that added to the fun. It was just completely erratic. He started following me around and doing things for no real reason. Then he just escaped through an air duct. Which put us all on edge. But it's, again, you add more people to it, the more the emergent storytelling happens and the more fun it is, I guess. But also, I think it works and functions as a core game better with more people.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
I think that goes back to my previous point. I think it gets more cooperative and competitive when you've got more people on the map. And I think there's not a huge amount of scaling around player count. The only scaling that happens is a slight tweak. There's more adults in the intruder bag.
No, but also, if you think about it, like, when you make noise, and
yeah, that's what I was about to say, and it's more likely that the intruders are going to appear earlier because you're all making noise. But again, there's a mechanic that if you move together, if one person moves into a room and you move into a room with a person already in it, you don't make noise. You don't make another noise roll. So,
it doesn't matter, the board is going to be covered with noise markers.
If you all go off in different directions, but a lot of people who play with 4 or 5 don't. They stick in pairs.
Parties. I mean, that's the first rule of horror, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't split up. Whereas you and I are like, bye!
Separate ends of the map. And the map is large enough that I think it negatively impacts the play in 2 players.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's almost a part of me that wishes that you made the ship smaller if you're playing with 2 players.
Because there's 2 sides to the map. There's like a hard mode and an easy mode.
Yeah, which we've never played. The hard mode, I'm not entirely sure what's involved in that, but I don't think it makes it smaller. It's the same size.
I don't think it's going to make it any easier to win.
But that's not what it's about, listener.
No, but it's not. It really isn't, though, is it? It's about the most gruesome death you can have, and the most comedic death you can have, or the most comedic way you can survive death.
Yeah.
Mr. Spacesuit.
That's not comedic. That was just intelligent.
Oh, I was so fucking pissed off about that. So angry.
Right. I mean, for me, this suffers at 2 players.
It does.
More so than any other game that we've reviewed.
Yeah.
This suffers at 2 players, and I wanted my score to reflect that. Because I think I'd be doing a disservice if I said this is like, 2-player, perfect. We have a huge amount of fun as 2 players. I think we are us, and if you're considering this as a 2-player proposition, take into account everything that we've said, take into account the weight of the rules, take into account the backstabby nature of it. Does that work for you guys as a pair of gaming buddies?
But there's something so satisfying from both sides, knowing you've been stabbed in the back.
Yeah. Well, there's a righteous anger.
Like, well played,
yeah.
Also.
If you approach it like that, it's like, oh, well played, sir. You know, if you have that attitude towards it, I recommend it. I absolutely do. But if you don't, be wary, because that is in the nature of it. And I hope we've given you enough to, as potential sort of 2-player buyer of this, we've given you enough to sort of chew on and make you think whether it's for you or not. It's not designed to be a 2-player game, but it works for us, and we have a huge amount of fun with it.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you another question. I know we haven't actually done like our FOMO scalability score yet, but having now played it, would you still buy it at the price point it retails for?
Ooh. Yeah, because I wouldn't want to erase all the great memories we've had playing it. So yeah, I probably would.
Yeah, no, I reckon I would still buy it. Yeah.
Good question.
I don't know why I would have paid for it at list price, but the price we paid for it, which was sub 100.
Just.
Yeah.
I think it's worth it. Yeah, I think it's worth it.
Okay.
But again, it's a complete value judgment on your own part, so whether or not you feel that sort of does it for you.
So anyway, what did you score at?
3.
Ah! Bang on. I
Okay.
thought you were going to score it a 1.
No. Not going to score a 1. It's only a 3 because of the FOMO. I think.
Yeah.
I
Every time I play it, I'm
Yeah.
like, this would be better if there was someone else running
it makes me crave more board gaming buddies than anything else. I have to say.
Just makes me realise that I'm bored with you.
She said the thing, everybody. Right.
That's twice in 2 podcasts.
So that gives us an overall 2-player couples rating of 5.5, which we always round to a 6. I think you and I are both probably a little bit more comfortable saying a 5, but
Yeah.
our scoring system is our scoring system, so we will stick with it, the 6. Its mileage may vary as a 2-player game, depending on
And
who you
very
are.
much, I think, dependent on you as a couple.
Yeah, and as players, yeah, absolutely. So, that has been Nemesis. Thank you for joining us. If you listen to us on your podcast medium of choice and they let you leave reviews, we'd very much appreciate one. But until next time, have fun, be good to each other, and play lots of board games.